In one of my recent videos, I talked about rendering simultaneously while you're working on a project. Well, basically, what I was talking about was Google Colab. If you're in some sort of a hurry, this is a tool or an option that might save you some time. Well, not might, it definitely gonna save you some time. So what Google Colab, how to use it, and what are the pros and cons, that's what we are going to talk about in today's video. So let's start. Here I have made a simple Blender scene which like 24 frames, just simple animation. It got a particle system, it got a floor with a tile texture on it. Actually it's 3 textures, and then we got a Susan, and then we have a glowing cube and area light. It's very simple, and this is what we are going to render in Google Colab. But before we send this file to Google Colab, we need to prepare this file to render on Google Colab. So what exactly that means? Well, like I said, this got a particle system and a textures on this floor. I don't even remember where these textures are located in my computer. And particle system is it's simulation. So if we send this to Google Colab, we're definitely going to face some issues. We're going to see a missing textures, and this particle system probably not going to work. So first we need to make sure that we send every necessary file to Google Colab that we need for rendering. Instead of finding where my textures located and just upload them to Google Colab, here what I'm going to do is I pack all those textures into blend file. So it's easy to do. Go to file, external data, and pack resources. Here it packs 6 files. I'm not even sure what other 6 files are, but it packs 6 files. And now for the simulation, what we have to do is we have to first bake this simulation. And for that, what I'm going to do is here in the particle setting under cache, I enable the disk cache, and here I give it a name. Let's call it particle sim, and I'm going to hit bake, and now it's going to bake the particle sim. It's 24 frames and it's already done. So where exactly this particle sim or this cache file located? Well, all these cache files are located exactly where I saved my blend file. You can see here in the blend cache underscore blender scene folder. This got all the files of the simulation. So that's it. That's how we're going to pack everything we need into the Blender file. Before we move on to render, I just need to point out a few things. Is that here my render setting is pretty simple, just 256 samples, and I'm printing on Filmic, motion blur, and it's just HD. That's all. 24 FPS, and here in the output I'm gonna type just 2 slashes. That's all. And file format, you can set PNG, JPEG, EXR, whatever you want here, but you can also change that in the Google Colab, so I'm not going to worry about that here. Now we have set everything's up, so I'm going to save it again. I'm going to upload those files to my Google Drive. So I'm going to drag all my cache files and the blend file and drop it in the Google Drive. Now let's prepare our Google Colab. So here I'm in the Google Colab. It's colab.research.google.com. And before we started, let me tell you exactly what Google Colab is. If you don't know what Google Colab is, basically it is a secondary computer that lives in the cloud. It definitely won't take any physical space. It lives in the cloud, and you will have almost full access to it. You can install a software, you can run a software inside that, and you can copy files into it, you can move files, you can do a lot of things, and that's what we are going to do here. For that, you need to have a Google account because it's Google. So once you have a Google account, like we did earlier, upload your files to Google Drive, and then here in the colab.research.google.com, when you come to this page, you will welcome with this screen. You can click new notebook and start from scratch, but here what I'm going to do, I'm going to upload section, and I'm going to upload a file that I have. You can grab that file from the link below. I'm going to select that render with Colab file, and I'm going to open it. This will upload that file into Google Colab, and now it's going to open that file. Well, this is it. This is how we're going to render our scene. Initially, when you see it, don't be scared. I know it's look like a bunch of codes, but it's not that scary. Here what we have is a bunch of code that execute each steps onto getting our scene rendered. Before we run anything, we need to set some settings. So go to Edit, Notebook Settings, and here make sure you have the GPU enabled and this omit cell output when saving this notebook checked, and then save. Right now, hit in here top right corner, hit connect. This will connect us to a Google Colab session. Okay, now it's connected. Just focus on this first cell, and here I have this comment saying download Blender from repository. Run once unless version change. We're gonna come back to the last part, but first what you have to do is, in order to run Blender in our secondary computer or Google Colab, we need the Blender setup. We need to install it. So where are we gonna get our Blender setups? Well, that's what we're gonna specify here. This scene I actually created with Blender 3.2.0. So I need to find that exact version and give this its setups link. So I'm going to, you can find that in the builder.blender.org/download/ here in the daily, or you can just go to this download.blender.org/release page. This contains all the Blender releases from Blender 1 to all the way up to Blender 3.2, all the stable releases. If you're using a beta or alpha, then you can go to daily builds, find that specific file. Make sure to find that specific file that built on the exact date. Right, these are daily builds, so a lot of changes could happen in beta and alpha versions. So make sure to find the exact version, and then you can just copy its link and paste it here. So since I'm using Blender 3.2, I'm going to click on 3.2 and make sure whether you're using Windows or Mac or Linux or whatever in your personal computer, in Google Colab it runs Linux. So instead of grabbing the Windows 64 MSI, because I'm running Windows here in this computer, I can't use that in the Google Colab. I need to keep this Linux version. So I'm gonna right click, copy link, and come to Google Colab and paste it here. Right, and then I'm gonna run that file. What that does is it's gonna download our Blender 3.2 setup to our Google Colab. Okay, now it's finished downloading. Took few minutes, but now it's finished. So we have downloaded Blender to our Google Colab. Before we moving forward, we need to connect our Google Drive to this Google session. Remember, we uploaded our blend file to Google Drive, so you need to make a connection with Google Drive and Google Colab. For that, I just run this simple code. We don't need to change anything, just run it. It will pop up this message to ask for the permission to connect to the Google Drive, and so we connect to Google Drive. And now it's connected. Now here in this files, if you click on this dashboard files, here we have folder called Drive. Here you can also see the downloaded Blender setup that we downloaded in the previous cell. Here you can see that, and also we have this Drive. This is actually our Google Drive. It goes under Drive, My Drive, and here all the files that I have in my Google Drive. Here you can see on the Google Colab tutorial here, this is the two files that we uploaded to Google Drive. We have made the connection, and now we can deal with the next things. So now you're probably wondering, do I have to download Blender every single time I run Colab? Well, if you're using a different version, let's just say the next scene you're going to render in Colab you're using a Blender 2.3, then yes, you have to download the new version. But if you're using the exact same version, you don't need to, because since we have made a connection between Google Drive and Google Colab, we can keep a copy of this setup in our Google Drive. So that's what we're going to do in the next cell. We're going to copy our Blender setup to the Google Drive. Here we got two locations. We have one where we specify where is our Blender setup. In the next path, we're going to say where we want it to be copied to. Here all I'm going to do is I'm just going to come here and just select our file name of the Blender setup, and here I come here, and after the slash content slash, here I'm going to select this and replace it. This will make the connection to our Blender file. You can right click here and copy path and paste here. You can do it any way you like. And for the next, I'm going to specify where I want this Blender version to store in my Google Drive. So here in this folder, Google Colab tutorial folder on my Google Drive, I'm going to click on this three dot and copy the path. Then I'm going to select all this and paste it. Sorry, I'm going to select all this until this last slash and then paste it, because we need to give the name of our Blender file. So since this is my old version, I also need to copy this and paste here. So now we made the connection. Now we tell where our Blender setup is and where we want it to copy it to. So let's run it. And the next file, what we're going to do is we're going to copy that Blender file back into Colab. So you may wondering why we already have a Blender file. Yes, but think like this, like in your next visit, you're not going to download the Blender setup. So you don't have that Blender setup in your Google Colab. You have a copy of that in Google Drive. So you need to import it to Google Colab. So that's why we need to copy Blender back into Colab. So here in the first time you're using, you can skip that step. But in your next visit, you have to run this cell. So all you have to do is just replace these two links. That's all. And just run it. But here I'm not going to run it because I already have the Blender setup. And now we got our Blender setup. Let's install it. So here in this cell, we're going to tell which file we're going to install. Here you have to give the name of the Blender file, not the path, just the name. Here I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that name from here and paste it here, right? And then I'm going to install that. So it's done. And in the next cell, it's something you don't need to care that much. It is just a cell that we need to run to get rid of few errors. In this process, you can come across few errors, and this cell will eliminate those errors. So that's why this cell exists. So just run it. In the next cell, we are going to tell Colab about our blend file. We are going to tell where it's located and assign that path to the file name. Think of file name as a variable that you declare in the beginning of a program when you are coding. So now I'm going to find our blend file. Here, blender scene.blend. Click on these three dots and copy path and paste it here inside these two inverted commas. Now run that cell. Okay, now we are in the last cell. This is where we render our scene. To render a scene in Blender, first we need to open it. So for that, we need to find our Blender application. We installed Blender a few cells back. So let's find it and put it here in the first section. Here you can see where we installed Blender, and here is our Blender application. Copy its path and paste it here. We actually do not need this first part of the path, so I removed it. Just the folder name and the Blender application name. So we told Colab where our Blender scene is, so it can open it now. After that, you can see these few letters: $file name, no audio, E, cycles, O, and another path, and a few more letters. So what are they? These are called command line arguments. If you go to this page in the Blender manual, you can see what they stands for. If you want to add your own, you can find them from here. But here I'm going to only explain what these are. First, the first simple B means run this Blender in the background. Basically it means it is not going to open Blender like this. It's just going to run Blender in the command line. So we open our Blender, tell it to run in the background, and now we need to tell which file to open. Here in the previous cell, we actually assigned that blend file to this file name. So we can just put that name here with $sign in front of it. Then we tell Colab this Blender project contains no audio from here, and this capital E stands for render engine. So we are using Cycles render engine, so we tell that here, Cycles. After that, this O tell Colab where the output going to be, where we want our render to store. For that, I am going to Google Drive and create a folder. Let's call it renders. And now I can find it from here. Copy its path and replace here. After that last slash, I am going to tell the output file name. Here I will call it test render underscore. You can give it any name. Then we have to specify start and end frame of our animation. That's what this S and E means. In our Blender scene, we start from frame 1 and ends in 24. Let's put it here, 1 and 24. A means animation, since we are rendering an animation. And this F means file output format. You can type PNG, or you can tell to render to any other format like JPEG, EXR. You can find those names from here. I'm going to keep it at PNG. After that, we have to tell which kind of a GPU we need to use. Here I tell it to use CUDA. You can put optics if you want, but here I keep it at CUDA. So that's it. That's all we have to do before the render. You may think it is a lot of work, but this is just the first time. After that, you can set this up within a minute. So we got only one thing left. Run this final cell to start rendering. See, it start rendering. Until that finishes, let's talk about Google Colab's pros and cons, so you can decide whether it is a handy tool to add to your arsenal. The first thing is its speed. Well, the reason I put it for both pro and con, because it's actually depend on your personal computer or your normal rendering computer. If you have a very high-end PC, this might not be what you expect, because it's not that crazy fast. But if you have a low-end PC, this is probably what you need. This have a okay speed, not too fast, not too slow, but it's definitely, if you have a high-end PC, this is probably not a good option for you to rendering your project. If you want more speed, you can go for a free render farm like sheepit or any other paid render farms. But the best thing about this is that when this rendering is happening, you have all of your PC left. Think about this, like when you're doing a normal render, it takes all of your GPU, all of your CPU, all of your RAM. It just basically take over your whole computer. So you can't really do much while the rendering is happening. You have to let the computer just do its job. But when we run Colab, it leaves majority of your PC to yourself. For example, recently I did this animation and I only had to two weeks to completely start and finish it, the whole animation. So there what I did, I just basically run through every shot and kind of did the whole animation roughly, and then come back to each shot and finalize every single shot one by one. I do a one shot and then let it render in the Google Colab, and then I start working on the second shot while that rendering happening on the background. Then I finish that shot and put it to Colab again, and then I work on the third shot. So because of this Colab, I able to work simultaneously while the rendering happening in the background. So instead of just finalizing everything and then spend another few days rendering, I able to spend a lot more time on my shots. If you want to know more about that animation, check this video out. And also Google Colab provides you better privacy for your renders, especially when compared to something like sheepit render farm. sheepit render farm is free, it is community driven render farm. So compared to that, here you can have a privacy to your project. And the other thing is, this is not just for rendering. You can also bake simulations here. The simulation that uses GPU to its calculations, you can do them here inside Colab. And the next one is Eevee. Well, you can run Eevee in Google Colab, but it got few problem because when we run on Colab, just like you saw before, we actually running it on the background. There are few things in Eevee that actually you need to open Blender to make those features work, such as screen space reflections and all those screen space stuff. So you can run Eevee in Colab, but you cannot get the best of Eevee. So it kind of fell into both categories. And when it comes to other disadvantages of using Colab, you always have to make sure your browser is open. Your browser needs to open every time. If you're using a very power hungry, RAM hungry browser, then this might be a big problem, but otherwise, it's okay. And also sometimes when your browser is not active, it kind of just closes its session by itself. So while you render, you once in a while you just have to come back to your browser and just check whether your animation is whether your rendering is still going on. If not, then you have to kind of connect it back again to resume the rendering. And also you have a limited time access for your rendering. You only get few hours per day. For me, maximum I got is around 7 hours per day. I'm not sure exactly how many hours you will get, but usually you will get around that 7-hour marks for your rendering. And after that, you have to kind of connect to a CPU instead of GPU, which is not something that I would recommend, because it's just not going to do your job. Now you can see our Blender project is finished rendering. And now when I go to my Google Drive, I can see all these rendered files. Our particle system is working, no missing textures. So that's how we did our render using Google Colab. If you want to download this, select all this and right click and hit download. And by the way, this is not just for simple rendering. If you had some compositing done, this will work with that too. I guess that's something I can add to that list. That's it. That's all about rendering in Google Colab. But before you exit, go to here, click on this arrow and go to Manage Session and hit Terminate to close your Google Colab session. Do it every time when you done rendering. Make sure to exit out of your session. So that's it. That's all about Google Colab. It may look like scary at first, but don't worry, just give it a try. Definitely a handy tool to have in your arsenal. Again, the notebook file I use in this video, you can download it from link below. So check in the description. And if you want to learn more about Google Colab, I actually posted this article on my Patreon page like 2 months ago. And also, if you're really into cloud GPU rendering, and even if you want to know more about Google Colab, just go to this amazing channel called 𝒚𝒐𝒎𝒏𝒕. It got so many amazing tutorials, especially regarding cloud GPU rendering. So that's it. That's all about rendering using your Google Colab. I hope you learned something cool, something new. I mean, that's what we like to do. We not only create stuff, we let you create with us. Hit that like button, comment your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe to Hello Physics Learn so you won't miss out when the next video drops. So until next time,